Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Anthony Vitiello, who's Director of Marketing at Ultraship TMS. And today we're going to talk about leveraging TMS capabilities to become a shipper of choice. Now, every time that capacity gets tight in the transportation market, as we find ourselves in today, you always hear a lot of discussions about, the importance of becoming a shipper of choice in the eyes of carriers. But what does that mean exactly? What's really important to carriers today, and how can a transportation management system help you to secure capacity and deliver and develop stronger relationships with carriers? Well, that's going to be the focus of today's conversation, and it's great to have Anthony on the program to share his insights and perspective on this topic. So, Anthony, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Adrian. Very glad to be here today.
Well, Anthony, you and I have known each other for quite a while. I know you do a lot of blogging on all this topic, and you've got a pulse on what's happening in the transportation industry, working with your clients and all that. So let's start with this whole discussion. Like I said, just now, obviously very tight capacity out there. Rates are climbing for a lot of shippers out there in the market, and again, you hear that term, shipper of choice, and how important that is, to be viewed that way in the eyes of carriers. Now, there's a lot of things that, fall under that umbrella, could fall under the umbrella in terms of becoming a shipper of choice. But from your perspective, what you're hearing from your clients, I mean, what's most important to carriers today? I mean, what's table stakes versus what's truly differentiating?
Well, that's a great question. I would say the things that shippers have been doing up to the recent capacity crunch are still effective strategies, but anymore they're not enough of an enticement to really compel carriers to pledge their allegiance to moving your freight in a preferential manner. After all, prompt and on-time payment is really something that should be given in almost any industry. It's not enough just to say, oh, well, we pay quick. There are definitely more pressing considerations facing carriers and, by extension, the shippers they serve today. And I would say that these considerations are all centered around the dynamics that impact capacity, particularly in this environment. Things that, like the impact of the ELD mandate, which, as we know, has pushed a lot of smaller carriers, owner-operators, mom and pops that really make up a disproportionate number of carrier companies out of business, which obviously impacts capacity. Other things like tightened hours of service rules, which cut deeply into the volume of hours that your freight can be moving every day. Things like rising fuel surcharges, tolls, and now we're seeing uplifting rates for driver pay. All these things are putting pressure on your carrier's margins. So simply ensuring timely communications and prompt, accurate settlement just isn't enough anymore to make you stand out in a carrier's mind. They have too much business to choose from, right? So shippers today got to find innovative ways to help carriers claw time that's being cut short for them by some of these regulations and other forces. They have to find ways to uncover cost savings opportunities that can help their carriers offset the rising costs that are eroding carrier margins. If you can do those things, you're going to attract far greater attention and better service from your carrier base.
Yeah, I like that phrase in terms of climb back, time, because it is, you're right. I mean, I think that there's a lot of things like, paying, carriers on time. I mean, I view that as kind of table stakes these days, right? You've got to, that's kind of a given that if you're not doing that and you're not, you're going to be at a disadvantage. But I think the time dimension for carriers is becoming, much more important in terms of keeping those assets moving. And that obviously affects the drivers and their hours and their quality of life, if you will, in terms of sitting and waiting, idle at a facility. So I want to focus on that piece first, in terms of the ability to claw back, time as one dimension of something that could be differentiating from a shipper of choice perspective. Within the context of a TMS, right? What can a TMS do? What are some of the features or capabilities that a TMS can bring to help shippers, help carriers claw back some of that time?
Another great question. I'd say a fantastic example of how TMS technology, can be employed to that ends is the advanced scheduling module that, Ultraship TMS built and deployed back in, I think the first quarter of 2017. The primary purpose of this particular solution that we built was to reduce the hours that drivers were going to be spent waiting to be loaded or unloaded at pick up and drop off locations, sitting idle in detention while their daily allocation of service hours just was frittered away, pushing things into the next day, and so on. The hours the carriers spend waiting to be loaded or unloaded, that's hours that your freight's not moving through the supply chain. So it seemed really appropriate in our minds to focus on solutions that would minimize or even eliminate that wasted time. As always, we like to focus here at UltraShip TMS on delivering technology that's very flexible and it meets and accommodates the very specific needs of each customer and the unique contours of their network. Too often logistics IT providers deliver, I don't want to say cookie cutter solutions, but fairly rigid solutions which don't really work hand in glove with the shipper's needs, and of course, more importantly, don't emphasize addressing those real world necessities that face other stakeholders in the supply chain process, like carriers, for example. Carriers are just one of those stakeholders that are frequently overlooked. But for this solution, we build it to help shippers be better, more collaborative partners, the warehouses, other facets of their supply chain. Our guys worked hard to deliver the automation of pickup and delivery schedule for shipments inbound between vendors and shippers, or outbound between shippers and the shipper's customers. The solution that we produced allows transportation planners, or in some cases it can be sales reps or even the customers themselves, to view centralized scheduling interface that's built into the TMS application. As loads are planned, pickup and delivery times can be selected from a calendar that shows all the available pickup and delivery times at each discrete location. As the slots are chosen and selected and removed, they're removed in real time from that centralized calendar. More importantly, from the flexibility standpoint, if shipments get detained in transit, for example, those schedules can be reassigned, replacing the slot that was missed, grabbing a new slot, ensuring that the timely loading and unloading happens according to new recalculated ETAs. It even supports the automation of individual dock door scheduling, which can help DCs better plan their labor resource allocation and increase throughput, all of which results in clawing back some of that time. Our shippers who've implemented advanced scheduling in 2017 are today reporting that they're more attractive to carriers who understandably are going to gravitate toward accepting loads from shippers who are more respectful and mindful of their time. Plus, they gain, the added benefits that come from the visibility into carrier performance in terms of pickup and delivery, which helps further improve planning, even down to the individual location level, and that results in increasing efficiency and helps claw back some of those savings.
Yeah, when it comes to detention, I think that's something I hear a lot from carriers as well, and of course there's detention fees, right, that shippers pay if they go above a certain amount of time sitting there, which is costly to shippers. But carriers at the end of the day, they'd rather not charge those detention fees. They'd rather get in and out so they can pick up that that next load,
grab a backhaul, something.
So right, rather than just be sitting there and waiting. So detention fees, yeah, there's some recoup there, but it's not really what they want to do. Ideally, they want to be in and out, as planned, and keep that asset moving, keep that truck driver, productive. Now, you talked about flexibility, and certainly appointment schedule is one of those things that on the surface might seem like a simple thing, and it might be like a one-stop shop kind of process that all shippers would do. But in reality, there's a lot of diversity in terms of how shippers may want to approach or enable appointment scheduling. Can you kind of describe maybe some of the different options or approaches that shippers take with regards to appointment scheduling?
Yeah, absolutely. A very salient point. It's things that seem simple. We don't deliver a simple solution. This is a complicated problem, and it requires a solution that's very flexible. Advanced scheduling from UltraShip delivers customizable business rules down to the lane level. So it's not like, every DC is open from 9 to 5. It doesn't really work that way in real life. Our system accounts for things like live loads, drop trailers, even some yard management capabilities to better help drop yards and trailer pools function smoothly and effectively. Here's how it works. Beginning during implementation, the location hours, the specific location hours for all pickup and drop-off locations are logged into the TMS. This drives great visibility and supports reports on important scheduling metrics like on time to appointment versus on time to the requested date is a good example of one of those. And the system will generate exception reports, send out automatic alerts for unappointed loads, for example, missed pickups. This ensures all appointments are set ahead of shipment, pickup, or delivery. It also drives compliance reporting that ensures any patterns of subpar performance are identified and addressed. But in practical use, which is, I think, more toward what you were asking, how it works is when a transportation user creates a new shipment, or when a sales rep generates a shipment using the web portal, for example, they're given access to that intuitive, easy-to-use scheduling screen with all the available location-specific pickup and drop-off times and dates. Carrier appointment scheduling also supported, and carriers accepted tenders. When the carriers accept tenders, they're given access and visibility to the same real-time availability information in the TMS so that they can arrange pickup and drop-off schedules as well. Schedule statuses are easily recognizable in the system. It shows appointment icons on the shipment detail screen. It provides icons alerting users of missing appointments and changed appointments and such, so that way there's no surprises. You don't wind up with loads showing up and not being scheduled. There are a number of different options, flavors of this that can be deployed depending on business requirements. For example, real-time carrier notification of available loading bays, hours of operation, loading times within individual bays. It gets that granular if you want it to be. Each bay can be set individually, or they can use a facility default. Again, it's all about not cookie cutter. This is, it's going to work specifically for your, business rules and the carriers that you use. Carriers can select from a list of those available appointment times that are displayed. Also, if you have regular Monday shipment, regular Wednesday shipment, you can use fixed appointment times at each carrier facility. Those set up during the deployment process, and this allows the system to automatically schedule carriers' appointments based on their regularly assigned time slot. We can set it up so that appointment times can be supplied on the order. If pickup or delivery appointments want to be set in your order management system and transmitted to UltraShip TMS along with the other order information, that can be done via EPI or API prior to even offering the load to tender to any carrier. Appointments can be scheduled offline. Carriers can even be required to log in their appointment times from their end on the system. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, if you will.
Yes, I mean, it just shows really just kind of how different permutations of this is possible. I think the other important thing, I think that, and you referred to this earlier a little bit, is in many ways the appointment scheduling is kind of that glue that helps the warehouse as well, the receiving end as well, in terms of level loading their workload. I think what a lot of times what ends up happening at shippers that don't have this type of solution is, you could end up with, 5 trucks showing up at the same time.
Yeah. And even if they show up at their appointed times, you made the appointment in the system, but if the DC is running behind because they weren't, looped in, again, we talk about beyond TMS. That's sort of our, our slogan, if you will. And that's really the idea, is looking at the upstream and downstream impacts of what we do, so that, we're not operating in that bubble. What good is showing up for a 9 o'clock appointment if they can't get to your dock door till 11? It doesn't, right. So that's true. The system can even produce messages to be issued to the DC management whenever a bay is scheduled or released. They can even view the entire schedule at a global view for their daily throughput sort of engineering, which is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. So, I think this is something that, really has one foot in transportation and one foot in the distribution center to really, optimize, if you will, across both those operations. So let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about, we talked about clawback time. We talked about appointment scheduling as one example of a TMS capability that can help kind of address that front. But let's talk about the cost side of the equation now for carriers, and maybe what a shipper TMS can do, to help shippers, reduce some of the costs that they're incurring. Can you give some examples there of what's happening on that front?
Absolutely. This may be somewhat niche specific, but I think it's an excellent example of what you're talking about. I want to focus on a relatively new offering that we recently fielded that's sort of slanted toward cold chain shippers. As you know, we have quite a few food shipping clients, and there are other industries like medicine and medical industry, things for your temperature control shipping. We were fortunate enough to be first to market with a real-time temperature controlled shipment tracking functionality embedded directly into our TMS platform. We deliver this with integration via Fork Heights and or MacroPoint. And we have the distinction of being the first TMS provider to have it actually live in production inside of one of the country's largest protein processing and production companies. The way this helps to save money, for carriers in particular, is it eases the burden of claims. That for example, a receiver refuses a shipment at a big box store. Truckload full of steaks or something shows up, and they say it arrived outside of temperature tolerances. Typically, they're going to log that claim with the shipper. Now, before we had this technology in place, shippers would have to then reach out to the carrier that pulled the load, request some validation from the carrier's temperature logs that they keep as part of the work they do, and then there'd be this ensuing back and forth. There's a time-consuming drain. The carriers spending time on the phone back and forth trying to figure out where the breakdown happened, and of course at the end of all that wasted time is the problematic issue of who's going to pay for $180,000 shipment of spoiled steaks, right? A lot of cold chain product is very high value freight. So whether it's steaks or medicine, blood plasma, any other kind of temperature sensitive material, you're talking about a lot of money at the end of the day. So this technology solution provides shippers with real-time visibility into freight temperature in transit, so that any divergence from the accepted temperature parameters, any violation of that range is immediately recognized and can be mitigated well in advance of before the product is lost. So now when claims are logged with the shipper using UltraShip's temperature tracking solution, they're equipped right out of the blocks with an audit trail where they can produce logs that have timestamps showing the temperature as it was checked at every interval across the entire line haul. This somewhat simple solution helps unburden cold chain carriers from unplanned costs associated with claims. You wouldn't necessarily consider it, but this can add up to quite a chunk of change for the carrier and for the shipper.
Right. Well, not only from a, like you said, from a liability standpoint, but just the time and labor involved with processing, those claims and going through, now really everyone's operating off of the same data, if you will, which is real time. You're able to see if temperature is trending in the wrong direction and can take some preventative action perhaps before the load spoils or gets out of tolerance, preventing a claim to be filed to begin with. So I think that's pretty Yep. There's the power of this real-time visibility aspect of it.
Yeah, cost avoidance, as well as there's a labor component, as you point out, that good savings on that tip as well. So carriers definitely groove on that.
Now you mentioned obviously you've got some customers that are already using this. Any additional benefits that they've kind of experienced as a result of using this solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I would also mention that it can be used for tracking beyond just temperature control. That's what our cold chain shippers are most excited about. But yeah, other improvements in overall visibility, real-time controls driven by automated alerts that help a shipper mitigate, as you just said, would have previously resulted in a loss. Those audit histories that I mentioned, those are particularly useful for food shippers, that are grappling with Food Safety Modernization Act compliance, which is recently, been implemented, and other claims management functions beyond that. We've also been told that they're very happy with the data warehousing that they can use to support continuous improvements in their cold chain shipping, and overall improvements in just the collaborative capabilities, enabling the engagement of all the key stakeholders across the organization, both inside and outside of transportation and beyond, as we like to say. I keep hammering the beyond.
Great. Well, I think we've covered, two good, metrics here, kind of the clawing back time and obviously the cost piece. And we've talked about, how TMS can help in this area, appointment scheduling on the clawing back time, and now kind of this real-time freight visibility and temperature tracking, capability on the, cost avoidance and the cost side of the things. We're kind of getting short on time here, so I'm just going to go to my last question. I mean, as a way to wrap up, I mean, are there other ways that shippers can leverage their TMS and other TMS capabilities to, again, differentiate themselves in the eyes of carriers and become, again, shippers of choice?
Great question. And, I'll put on my marketing guy cap here for a minute and tell you, one of the things that we recommend, carriers, all technology users have grown much more savvy, and the expectation is so much higher. At this point, we tell our, shipper customers, promote your TMS to the carriers, position it to them as a value-added feature of doing, being in a partnership with you, doing business with you. The carriers certainly have grown much more savvy about all the systems that are out there because they have exposure to all of them. And they know firsthand which platforms are going to work well for them and which ones are going to overcomplicate process, that they're supposed to help simplify. Look, with efficiency and efficacy at a premium in today's environment, you better believe the carriers are going to gravitate toward the shippers that are using systems that have proven to be the most effective and that make their interactions the easiest, most efficient they can be. Let your carriers know the steps that you're taking to make their interaction with you easier and more profitable. And I don't think you'll have as much trouble finding people to haul your freight.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think that's the first time I've really have heard that. And I think it's a great point because I think it still surprises me how many shippers out there still number one, don't have a TMS, or number two, maybe they're using solutions that, are now 10 years old or plus, that aren't, modern by today's standards. And at the end of the day, it kind of creates that friction, that inefficiency, as you were just talking about. And it makes it harder for the carriers to do business with you, right? Because now they have to do more manual processing to support you and so forth. So I think, really positioning your TMS as saying, hey, look, we're investing at our end so that we can automate and we can, have as much data and information that we can work with each other on so that we can win-win for both of us. I think it's a smart, smart way to kind of position to the carriers. So
yeah, you certainly don't want them saying, "Oh yeah, geez, what a drag it is having, that system is so difficult to operate." You want them to know, hey, we made something that's simple for you to use, and they're going to just instinctually gravitate toward it.
Right. Well, Anthony, like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics. But I think this was obviously considering where we are in the market today and what's happening in the market, I think this was a great, and timely, topic. So I appreciate you making the time to share your insights and advice on this topic.
My pleasure. Full for the opportunity to share.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand at the UltraShip TMS website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Anthony, you can post it there. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium.
For sure.
Again, thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.
Bye.